So let me put this to you.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting,
Yeah.
your view of this. And what I would say to you is this. Statistically, it looks like in London right now, this is predominantly a problem of young black teenage boys who are members almost exclusively of gangs attacking each other, so that the perpetrators and the victims appear to be almost exclusively young black men. Do you think there is a racial element to that in terms of any cultural issues, racial issues? Or do you think it's the same problem they had in Glasgow, where they were white, but actually the race part of this is something that we might look at the statistics and think it's a black problem when it's not?
OK, so there are several regions of the country, let's just look at the facts, that have higher murder rates than London does. Clearly, throughout human history, black people have not had anything remotely resembling a monopoly on violence. Over the last few years, some of the most horrendous knife attacks, both the victims and the perpetrators have been white, and they've not been from London, including a 13-year-old girl stabbed to death in Southampton, a 16-year-old stabbed to death in Dinnington, a 7-year-old girl stabbed to death in York, a 5-year-old stabbed to death by its own mother in Oxfordshire. When both the perpetrator and the victims are white, race suddenly becomes unimportant. There is one limited sense in which race may be important. You could argue that only a very particular demographic of young black boys, only at a very particular stage in their lives, feel a degree of psychological self-hatred or contempt for themselves that they project onto other people who most remind them of themselves. However, the black-on-black violence paradigm, so-called, is never used in that way as a kind of psychological self-hatred model. It's used to give the public essentially the ridiculous impression that black school teachers, black doctors, black lawyers, black Premier League footballers, my grandmother, David Adjaye, Oswald Boateng, are all sort of an equal risk of violent crime. And
actually, well, it reminds me a little bit. I mean, it's different, but it's interwoven slightly into what happened in New Zealand, where you have this white supremacist committing an act of horror. Had he been an ISIS terrorist, the immediate reaction from many people would have been, this is a Muslim problem. Because he's a white supremacist, I've not heard people say, this is a white person problem.
Well, precisely. We have enough trouble getting what I'm going to call the racial virtue signalling right-wing press to call white supremacist terrorists by their proper name, let alone to force all white people to explain the bad actions of all other white people. For example, you will never be called upon to explain that not all middle-aged white men are paedophiles, despite the fact that hundreds, maybe thousands of them are convicted of sex offences every year, because it's self-evident that not all middle-aged white men are paedophiles.